Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast and founder of the Defenders Initiative. Welcome to this webcast sponsored by Cerby. I have two guests with me today, Alexander Schuckman, CISO of Colgate Palmolive. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the webcast, Alex.
How's it going?
Good. Also with us, we have Matt Chiotti, Chief Strategy Officer at Cerby. How you doing, Matt?
Hey, it's good to see you, Adrian. Good to see you, Alex.
Today, we are talking about how Colgate secured their social media accounts and the challenge of managing shared business accounts in general. And I'm really excited about this because this is going to be a different format from what you're used to if you've come to other Cyber Risk Alliance webcasts. So it's not often that we get a customer talking about how they've succeeded using a vendor's product, which I'm very excited about. I love case studies like this. And also, we're going to kick off with a video here in just a moment. And then Matt's going to lead most of the discussion, most of the questions. I might jump in from time to time, but it's mostly going to be a Matt and Alex show, and I'll get out of the way. As always, check the blue buttons down at the bottom of your screen there. The first blue button down there, that is your chat button. You can chat with each other. You can share where you're dialing in from. You can ask what all the honking and the noises are in the background. And most importantly, you can ask questions there. So if you have any questions as we go through, please ask them, and Matt will try and pull them in, or I'll try and pull them in the context of the conversation. So don't save your questions for the end. Though we will try and take some questions at the end if we have extra time as well. The other button you'll want to check out down there is the handouts button. That's the third button from the left. And we do have one PDF in there. And you're free to grab that PDF at any time. And I'll try and remind you as we go through the outro at the end to grab it if you haven't already. All right. So most CISOs don't own the social stack, but they own the blast radius when it's hijacked. Social accounts guard brand trust, ad budgets, and campaign pipelines, but they sit outside SSO, SCIM, and your normal governance. That's the last mile of identity. And today we'll show how Colgate closed it, first for social, then for other disconnected apps.
As soon as you lose access to your social media account, you're going to start losing followers. This really is one of the most stressful situations. My name is Alexander Schuckman. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Colgate Palmolive Company, and I've been here 27 years. Security incidents always seem to revolve around compromising one identity in one specific location, and that really leads to a large overall cybersecurity incident. As I started working in the information security organization, we really put a lot of focus on getting identity right as one of the first key pillars. One of the key differentiators when we evaluated Okta was the scalability of the solution. Having many different solutions in place and having them all have to interact with each other is always a nightmare. Being able to say, I have one source of truth, everything goes through Okta, all IDs are in Okta, all applications are managed by Okta, makes the employee's life a lot easier, but also on the cybersecurity side, it makes it much easier for us to defend.
Launching Okta at our company was a success because users saw the benefit of having one single place to get access to applications as well as launch those applications.
When we tried to apply that same identity management strategy towards social media platforms, that's where we started running into a problem. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of accounts.
In the past at other corporations, I've seen passwords being managed in Excel. I've seen passwords being managed by agencies at a much higher cost. And I've also seen, brand safety risk as blatant as having a password written on a Post-it note that's taped to someone's computer.
Cerby gives us the ability to manage the credentials or manage the login of anything on the internet. They are making it very easy for you to click one button within Okta and launch whatever application you're trying to get to, regardless of where it is and what it does.
We are able to enforce multi-factor authentication for our users, as well as we have the audit trail of who logged in, who changed the account. Our security team is much happier.
We know that we have the safety through Cerby to ensure that no matter what access is granted globally, that it will be safe. The challenge is big, but the solution is very simple. I found Cerby to be very intuitive, very easy to use, very easy to understand.
Change management is always a struggle when rolling out a global solution. However, with Cerby, tight integration with Okta and seamless user experience was a key.
The tool itself really is a revelation in terms of housing all that information in one secure place.
Having a solution implemented with Okta and Cerby helps eliminate risk, and we really don't have the concern anymore, and it's a much easier way to govern these social media accounts.
Well, I love that. I love that video. Thank you for putting that together with your team. And Alex, where are you today, by the way? Is that an AI background?
Yeah, I'm in New York City today at our corporate headquarters, right on 50th and Park, right across from the Waldorf Astoria, for all the people who are trying to figure out where I am.
I love it. I love it. So it's a real background, just like this is a real plant behind me on this side. So the one thing that stood out to me about that video was that there were a couple things that you guys called out. But I'm curious from your perspective, like, when did it first click for you that social accounts are identity assets, not just marketing tools?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Matt. I think, like most security programs, like most security practitioners, we are responding to incidents. We're looking at things from our SIM, our SOAR, whatever ticketing system you're using. And that's typically what you're used to. You're not getting involved in marketing. You're not getting involved in maybe some of the digital projects unless maybe they have a tie back to some of the corporate systems. So in our case, and probably like many other organizations, the time we first got involved with social media is when there's an incident. Mm-hmm. And then they start reacting and say, okay, how can we get back into the account? How do we deal with this account compromise? Let's involve the CISO and the security org, right? So then it follows more of your traditional IR playbook, like, okay, we have a system compromised, except in this case, it's not a system managed in your cloud. It's not a system managed in your infrastructure. It's a social media platform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned when we were talking before the call, and you just kind of hinted at it now, that there was an incident. Without going into specific details, I'm curious, like, you mentioned there were a few incidents. Like, what broke first? What was obvious maybe to you? What happened?
Yeah, I think this is a good lesson for the audience, and it was a good lesson for me, which is why I want to share it. Like every large-scale corporation, like every even medium-sized corporation, everyone's got social media accounts for all of their brands, for their corporate page, even if you're not selling something, right? You're selling your company as a corporate brand. For us, obviously, we have a large portfolio of products. One of those products' social media accounts got compromised. The content got removed, and then the attackers started putting posts on there. Well, of course, like every good social media follower, as soon as you start seeing posts that you don't like, you unfollow the account, right? There's no secret sauce here. As soon as you, and I think the thing that's really clear to understand is, as soon as you lose followers on a social media account, it's very hard to get them back. So, you can maybe get access to that account back, and now you Now, but how do you tell those followers that you got the account back when they're no longer following your social account? And this could be Facebook, this could be Instagram, this could be, and then fill in the blank on like the dozen or so social media platforms that are out there, right?
Yeah, I was looking at some of the research around this, and I've read that about just over half, 53% of account takeovers in general are social media takeovers. And when I've talked to some cyber teams and I bring up, social media, oftentimes I heard this is one I heard just last week. Someone said, I asked them about their corporate socials, and they said to me, yeah, we only have, in-house like 5 people on our social team. So it's pretty easy to manage access. And I said, have you asked about like the agencies that they use? And he was like, what do you mean? And I know that is often a huge part
Yeah.
of managing that access, because agency turnover is so common.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? So every company is going to have corporate communications, investor relations sites, especially if they're public. And there's a few employees in every company that are responsible for those areas. But then outside of that, like you mentioned, you have maybe subsidiaries, or you have other business entities that are contracting with marketing agencies. And those marketing agencies can log on and in less than 60 seconds spin up a Facebook page that says the company name / country, or may even just say the company name, not even identify the country.
Mm.
And that can be across all the social media platforms. So there's no barrier to entry. It's not like even where we're talking phishing and email where they have to register a domain. You don't even need to do that. You don't even need to spend $5.99 on a domain. You can register anything anywhere you want. And I think the reality is marketing agencies are doing that. They're doing it supported by some person at the company, but at the same time, there's no governance there.
I was at a dinner the other evening, actually, in not that far from where you are right now in Manhattan. And I was speaking with someone who used to do this work for an agency. And they told me a story that they logged in to Meta Business Manager using their personal credentials. And they saw that they still had access to a former client's account from 5 years ago. 5 years. And they actually had to send an email to their friend who still works there saying, hey, could you please remove this access, because it's been 5 years since I've worked there. And this is not like just an anecdote. We hear this all the time. And when we look at the research, we know that just about 24% of companies said that they just admitted, like, we don't even have a process for removing agency access when a contract ends.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about it, right? In a typical security program, you have a corporate IDP, you have an onboarding and offboarding process that's tied to HR, most likely, and you're provisioning laptops, you're deprovisioning them. That's a pretty standard formula at any type of company. But then you say, okay, well, what's that same process for social media? And you get like a blank stare. So, and then sometimes maybe you'll get the answer, oh, the agency is managing that. But remember that the agency is managing the creating content for the social channel. There's probably very little investment on the security side to actually make sure that that's being done in a secure manner. So perfect example that you see all the time in the agency, it'll be like, oh, there's 3 people on the account, so let's turn off MFA because it's too hard for us to pass that MFA token between the 3 people. So we'll just secure the social media account with a password, and that should be good enough until that password either gets leaked or cracked, and then all of a sudden you've lost access to your social media account.
Now, I know that it mentioned in the video, you guys are Okta customers. And so it sounded like up to that point, you had rolled out Okta for everything in your organization, with the exception of social media. Maybe talk a little bit more about why you couldn't manage using Okta. Why couldn't you extend that access to social media? Like what made it different?
Yeah, sure. So, I think we have a really nice success story. We consolidated many different IDPs and went with one corporate identity provider, which was Okta, and said, okay, now that's a simple way for employees to know their one username and their one password where we enforce MFA. Then we went and said, okay, let's look at our applications. Majority of our applications were SaaS-based applications in the cloud. They supported modern day authentication like SAML, and you could easily set them up in Okta. And now you have a very simple way for all the employees to access all those internet-based applications which are using modern day auth protocols. The problem on the social media side, it would be nice if they supported SAML, but they don't, because they were not made for corporations. They were made for consumers, and they were made for individual people to use them. They weren't made for large-scale companies, even though every large-scale company has a Facebook page or has an Instagram page or has a TikTok, right?
You hinted at it earlier around one of the challenges with it. So we know from looking at the research, Microsoft said probably 2 years ago at this point that 99% of identity attacks can be mitigated by having two-factor authentication enabled, right? You mentioned that oftentimes these accounts have two-factor authentication disabled. Talk to a little bit about maybe the practical impact of trying to enforce MFA for shared accounts. Maybe talk about some of the challenges you guys had around that.
Yeah, so obviously, none of the marketing agencies or any of the people involved here are doing anything maliciously, right? They're trying to post content, they're trying to create content on the go, typically from a mobile platform, because that's the easiest way to create and upload content for social media, no debate there. But then it's very easy to turn on MFA for a person, a mobile device. There's no real way to do that in any social platform, to share that one account with 5 people or 6 people or one person at a different time. So, and then a lot of these ad agencies are also then employing content creators or influencers who then also want to do a channel takeover, an account takeover, and post legitimate content, obviously. But again, they need to be able to log in from their phone to do that. So the easiest way to enable all these different scenarios is put a super easy password in on the account and then just share it over an unsecure method. They're probably SMS messaging it, which we know is insecure. Maybe they're emailing it, which again we know is insecure, and then never changing it. Remember, these social media platforms are not saying rotate your password every 90 days. They're making it very easy for passwords to be saved and passwords to stay consistent. So even if maybe you didn't do anything to compromise it initially, maybe you had a phishing attack and you had an email compromise, and that's how they got the social media password that was in an email from a year ago, and all of a sudden that's how they got into the account.
It's interesting you say that, because that's something that we hear extremely, extremely common, right? These social media accounts are just so often treated as being something that's outside of the IT and security purview. And I'm curious, like when you guys have been a Cerby customer now for, I think, close to 3 years, something like that, 2.5, 3 years,
Yep.
somewhere in that range. How did you look at it from an ROI perspective? And I know sometimes ROI around cybersecurity products can be sometimes difficult to measure, but maybe from a soft ROI perspective, from a marketing and agency user feel, like what did that look like? Whether it was faster account switching, fewer lockouts. I mean, I know from our research that we've looked at that social media managers often say they lose 10 hours plus a week having to navigate access issues across platforms. So even that's, even a small usability wins add up first. How did you look at that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we took a security mindset when we went and got involved in how to secure social media accounts. So from a security mindset perspective, we said, hey, we want to secure the authentication, and that was our goal. So that's how we justified Cerby from a security perspective. Plus, it was tightly coupled with our Okta, like you guys saw in the video, so it made easy sense. That's a tough ROI, because really everything we do is cost of business. It's security, right? It's
Sure.
not generating revenue. It's not selling more toothpaste. But then flip the script onto the other side of our business, which are the people actually running our business in the marketing, sales, and go to market areas, right? We have many different brands that the individuals are managing, and they are constantly switching between accounts. So you're in a digital marketing space, you may be responsible for 3 or 4 different brands, and you may be responsible for maybe 10 different social media accounts across Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, you name it, right? Any of the socials. So for them, it was a very difficult user interface. You logged in from a browser or from your phone, and everything was fine until you need to then log out of that, switch to brand 2, then do that again to brand 3. And each one of those, you had different passwords, you had different MFA if you wanted the native social account to be secure. So now what did they do? Then, of course, the easiest way to do all that is put it into a spreadsheet or some other insecure method, or turn off MFA like we mentioned before. So it's a hard thing, and they're just trying to do their job. They're just trying to post content and respond to posts, right? So once we put Cerby in, then we showed them, okay, you log into Cerby using your Okta credentials, so no new credential, the same credentials you're using to get to every other corporate application you're using every single day, like email. So no behavior change for them. They go to Okta to access email. Now they go to Okta to access Cerby. That's one click for them. Once they're in Cerby, they had a little tile to click for each of their social media accounts. So again, we made it very similar to what they already knew. When they go into Okta, they click the tile to open up their expense report. They click the tile to open up their HR. When they logged into Cerby, they just click the tile to go to this country's Instagram account, or this country's Facebook account, or this country's TikTok. So they didn't need to know anything. All they needed to know was click on the tile associated to where you want to go. And then when you need to go to the next account, just click on the next tile. So it was a very big time saver when people have to switch between social media platforms or switch between brands on social media platforms. It was a huge time saver, and I think that's the ROI. You're really having a marketing person more focused on digital marketing, not on how to log in securely.
So it sounds like there's 2 pieces to that. There's a business continuity part of it, but there's also the user experience, which is something that oftentimes in cyber we're not primarily focused on, but it sounds like that these 2 pieces were in play, right? Because I'd imagine that, you mentioned that you guys had several hundred social accounts. You have a team, internal, in-house, but you also have agencies that are also doing the same thing, like maybe managing multiple of your brands. They're constantly having to switch. But then you're also changing agencies, right? And then trying to manage, okay, this agency rolled off, we brought on this new agency. There must have also been just a level of complexity that your social teams were dealing with before Cerby that I would imagine a lot of that went away after deploying Cerby as well.
Yeah, so like the perfect example at each of your companies, ask your digital marketing team how many social media accounts they have. They'll most likely pull out a spreadsheet, or they'll rattle off a couple. Fast forward to after and that list is probably incomplete or outdated as soon as you save the spreadsheet. After you implement Cerby, you ask that same question, they'll just log into Cerby and look to see. Now instantly the last login for each of those accounts, who logged into them, and then if agency A had 3 people, you don't have to worry about did we onboard or offboard those 3 people. You just follow your standard onboarding and offboarding that you've already created with your corporate IDP, and there's no new offboarding steps for social media. So you're never going to lose access to a social media account as people change roles. Everything's managed by Cerby, everything's in one place. You never worry about losing access to your HR system because you say, oh, it's managed by Okta or it's managed by some corporate IDP. But how can you allow a social media account to be lost? That I think is one of the big ROIs is, how much time are you going to spend once you lose access to a social media account? There's no real help desk for getting it back. There's no contract that you have with each of the social media platforms. You have to follow the same workflow that a consumer follows when they lose access to their account, which is frustrating. So now, even though maybe you have millions of followers and your brand is very popular and you have tons of content on there, as soon as that account gets compromised or someone leaves from the agency and now you've lost access to that account, the ROI is really how much time is wasted to get back into that account so that you can own it again. That's a good solution that you probably wouldn't really have thought of initially when you're implementing Cerby to really protect social media.
I appreciate that from a business continuity standpoint. I think post-COVID, social media became just such a critical part, and during COVID became such a critical part of how businesses communicate with their consumers. And I think it's easy to get lost on that point, just realizing the complexity of managing all that. So there's that business continuity component. The one thing that also stood out to me in the video was there was 2 individuals that were not in IT, as far as I could tell. They weren't in IT. I think they were part of your marketing, your social team. And you and I were talking probably a couple of weeks ago just about how, oftentimes when security deploys a new tool, a lot of times it's met with a lot of resistance. Like, hey, I already have a way of doing this, and now you're wanting me to change essentially my workflow. Maybe talk a little bit about like the turnaround story, like, the skeptic who became the power user, like what flipped that switch for them?
Yeah, and so like a perfect example of that, and most of the audience are most likely cybersecurity or identity people. You're rolling out a solution, and if it works, the business user never sees it, or there's very little interaction with the business team beside maybe logging into the system or getting an alert from the system. In this case, Cerby's the exact opposite. Right, the business team is heavily involved and heavily using the tool because it's also their inventory of social media. It's their usage. If your digital marketing person in global wants to know who is using the Italy account, they can see that in Cerby. That gives them more of the accountability of who's using the accounts in their company. And it really helps them understand it. It's also, you have skeptics, like you mentioned, Matt. Hey, I've been doing this for a long time. We haven't gotten hacked yet, so we must be okay. That's one of my favorites, right? But then you show them, okay, this is how Cerby works, and look how easy it is to jump between account A, account B, and account C. For someone who's a power user and has been doing it their own way and basically sees how easy it is to do it in Cerby, they're like, oh my God, that's such a great time saver. Also, it gives me visibility into what everyone's doing. So when we rolled out Cerby, we didn't roll it out as an IT tool. We sent out a communication from our digital team, not from IT, and said, self-service enroll your social media account. Kind of the opposite of IT. IT is always like, hey, we're going to deploy software to your machine and
You must.
and you must use it. Yeah. This was, hey, if you want to make it easier to manage your social media, enroll your account here. Obviously, they had the credentials to the social account, which is why we needed them to enroll it for all the existing ones. But then for all the net new, we made it very easy for them to enroll Cerby from day one of a social media account creation going forward. And that really made it a very smooth rollout because it was really business driven and business led. And the business teams could see the progress, log into Cerby and see how many accounts are there. And there were 100 yesterday, and there's 105 today. And then you can easily watch the progress. You can really get away from your static spreadsheet and say, hey, I know all the social media accounts, and I also know who's logging into them, from which agencies, and which social media accounts have not had any logins for a long time. So Cerby helps you really easily govern all that and do it in a very secure manner. Maybe that agency person you only used for 2 weeks. In the old world, you would give them the password, and then no one's remembering to change that password. That person leaves from the agency, like your example, he or she still has the password to that social account. In Cerby, as soon as Cerby's managing the account, the instant that agency person logs out of the account, Cerby auto-rotates the password. And now the social account is protected. Well, security people are like, yeah, that's obvious. Our PAM solutions have been doing that for years. But ask a digital marketing person how many times they auto-rotate the password themselves manually. The answer is 0, right? I don't think we would do it manually either.
Right. I appreciate that. So Robert asked a good question in the chat. His question was like, what was the agency experience like with respect to them connecting with Cerby and onboarding? You mentioned that for Colgate employees, I think you were saying they were self-registering these accounts. What was the feedback you heard around the agency experience with respect to Cerby?
Yeah, so for our organization, a lot of our interaction with the agency is sharing a lot of documents, sharing a lot of creative, interacting very closely with them. So we have a lot of corporate systems that we use on that side of the house, like a digital asset repository or something to that effect. So they already had access to our systems because we were working with them as an extension of our own organization. By implementing Cerby and tying it to your corporate IDP, Okta in this case, it was the same experience for the agency as it was for the employees. Oh, it's just one other square in Okta that you click and launch Cerby, and here's all the social there. Oh, okay, that's fine. Like, that was the whole training. There was no more training. It's not like you had to explain to an agency person how to use the tool different than how the employee, like even our own employees could teach our agency teams how to use it because it was the same tool they were using. So I do think that was really powerful, is we're giving a really seamless experience, not here's how you do something as an employee and it's completely different with a third-party marketing agency.
I love that. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the pre-show part of this was just about how you guys started with social media. That was kind of your original use case, but at some point you realized that this, what we're called disconnected applications. They're disconnected from your Okta, from a SailPoint, or whatever someone might be using for IAM and IGA. You realize that this challenge wasn't just limited to social. There were other disconnected apps that surfaced. Maybe talk a little bit more about, what did that look like for you guys? What was that process like?
Sure. So it was 100%, like you heard, we brought Cerby in to solve a problem for social media, and that was our key use case for what we needed to solve. But then once we understood the technology and once we understood the platform, we saw, hey, there are other applications that are used within our company, many of which are not modern day apps. They're not SAML based. And we said, how do we manage those? We don't want to keep a username and password associated to that individual application. The answer is really, well, Cerby can manage those accounts as well, and the access to those corporate applications that are not using modern day auth. And that's another great way to say, well, we already have a corporate identity. Can we extend that to systems that are not supporting corporate IDP or SAML? And then you can also close audit findings associated to, are you managing credentials? Are you managing onboarding? Are you managing offboarding? Are you implementing MFA? All the modern day authentication security measures automatically come along for the ride because Cerby is tied to your corporate IDP.
That's really powerful. I think, when you think about this kind of this broader world of disconnected applications, based on our research, we looked at the top 10,000 applications that were used in the enterprise, and there are way more than 10,000. I think last time I checked, there was like 30 plus thousand. But just looking at that top third of apps that are used in the enterprise, we know that it's only about 52% that support the SAML standard, right? So the vast, 48% or so of applications do not. And we know that the average organization has somewhere in excess of 100 disconnected apps. And depending on where someone sits on the size of the organization, if an organization's been around for a while, that number of disconnected apps is larger. Although we have some customers that have been in business for only 10 years and they've got hundreds of these. Maybe Alex, from your perspective, one of the questions that I often get is, if someone is either not in the identity space, or maybe they just haven't really researched the disconnected app challenge. One of the questions I often get is just what are some examples of these applications outside of social that are disconnected? So maybe talk a little bit, you don't have to mention specific apps, but
Sure.
are there specific, categories where you see that federation isn't always possible?
Yeah, so I think it's a great point, and it's not something that intuitive. I mean, some of the solutions out there on the security vendor ecosystem help you find shadow IT or unsanctioned app, whatever buzzword terminology they want, but they don't really tell you how to fix the problem. They tell you where your problem is, right? I think what's really interesting, and the use cases we saw from Cerby perspective was, hey, look, you have M&A. Every company has M&A going on a merger or an acquisition, and you inherit the applications that company has. You can't, day one after an M&A replace all their applications.
Right.
That's a great use case for Cerby. That company you're acquiring or merging with may have an HR or a finance or an order to cash or some type of marketing system that has been around for many years. It's most likely on premise, and it may or may not support modern day auth. Cerby is a great example where you can say, hey, we can easily integrate that to our platform while we take the time to evaluate a replacement or how to merge it with our existing systems. The other one are, you have a lot of global apps, but then there's always local apps. Every market needs some specific app. Maybe the one that I'm thinking of is you have HR requirements in a specific division that's different from your corporate. That app probably has been contracted by a regional business owner, and they don't know to integrate it to a corporate IDP, or maybe because that's a regional application, they don't even support SAML. But it's a core business process. It's an HR system, it's a finance system, it's a payroll system. A lot of local payroll systems are mandatory for that country. And we can't just go in and say, hey, we can replace your payroll system in 5 minutes, because there's legal reasons they need to use a local payroll. But at the same time, payroll is important. You want to have secure authentication into that system, and Cerby can help do that.
Yeah, we see this a lot with, one of the questions I often get, just yesterday I was in New York talking to an audience about this. One of the questions I often get is what are these apps? What do they look like? And you're right. Oftentimes it might be a specific application that's used by maybe a part of your line of business. There's something specific to the vertical that you're in. Oftentimes people, they think of like what I would call like a tier one SaaS app, like a 365. And we're like, no, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about Salesforce. We're not talking about those tier one SaaS apps. They support all the standards. They support SAML. They support SCIM for the joiner, mover, and leaver workflows. We're talking about either applications that they could be legacy, they could be on-prem, or they could just be some third-party app that for whatever reason does not support SAML for single sign-on or SCIM for joiner, mover, and leaver workflows. Those are the disconnected apps that we're talking about here, and that's squarely where Cerby plays. In fact, the other question I often get too is just like, hey, are you guys, like, I already have an Okta investment, or I already have a Savient or a SailPoint or an Entra. Are you competing with them? And what I say is like, no. In fact, we're partners with each one of those companies because we help them extend their core capabilities to this whole group of applications that out of the box they can't support. So for a customer that's coming to Cerby, what we usually say is like, hey, this is an investment in Cerby helps you realize a better and higher ROI on your existing identity investments, because now you're getting complete coverage as opposed to just covering maybe 60, 70% of your environment.
Yeah, a great example that probably people are not thinking of and are not managing, but I guarantee exists in any multinational corporation. You have individual local country government websites where you have to do submissions. Maybe it's
That's
a
right.
tax submission, maybe it's a sales submission, maybe it's some audit submission. Obviously, those are regulatory requirements of that country, but at the same time, there's some login associated to that. It's obviously not a modern day SAML-based application, and you can't ask a government entity to integrate with your
Good
corporate
luck.
IDP. Good luck with that. Yeah. So you can put Cerby on top of that. You can secure it so your onboarding, offboarding, mover, leaver, joiners is all good. And you really don't want someone who's not authorized from your company to be doing submissions. Those are not use cases we would have ever thought day one that we would use Cerby for. Right? Nobody's telling us to solve that problem. But then after you understand, Cerby can do a lot of different things, you go, maybe it can help me with that government tax submission I do once a year in some LATAM country. I can put Cerby in front of it and then give access to the tax department who already have access to Okta and now can jump into Cerby and then launch that portal in a secure manner.
So for our audience, the 130 plus people that are listening right now, which I imagine is going to be a mix of security practitioners, those that are hands-on, some security executives, what would maybe be the first move you'd recommend? Like what should security teams be asking their marketing, their comms teams today? How would you start that conversation?
Yeah, so I think it's a good opportunity for security practitioners. It's probably not an easy conversation. It's probably not like, hey, I'm rolling out a new AV or rolling out email protection. Those are obvious ones. It's more go to your digital organization. If you have a chief digital officer or you have a digital marketing lead and say, how are you protecting social media account compromise? And I think in the news, lots of people have seen celebrities' accounts getting hacked and fake posts being put. So it's not an unknown from a happening perspective. And say, well, is there an appetite for us, meaning the security team, to help you govern it? Not to take it over, not to manage it and put a bunch of bureaucratic red tape in front of it with a request process, but help you secure it, but still let you manage the day-to-day. We're not trying to manage the day-to-day like we do in maybe other corporate systems. We don't want to be involved in that day-to-day process because it is very fluid and the marketing team own it. We don't know what agencies you're using. We don't know who is supposed to do that. Keep that responsibility where it lies today. Just make it done in a more organized fashion. If you ask that question and your digital lead says, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, then I think you have an appetite. or even just ask the even more simple question, do you know all the social media channels we have in the company?
I appreciate that. I know one of the things that's, we alluded to this a little bit earlier. It's oftentimes in security and IT, when we're trying to push something out, we get pushback. And I think a lot of times it's not even necessarily the tool itself. I mean, it could be, but a lot of times it's how we do it. And like you said, like if there's a way, and it's always the best way to partner with the business with it, where they're the one driving it. Like I think you'd probably the same thing, right? Like the impact there is so much greater. The adoption of it, as opposed to someone who's a quote unquote outsider pushing it in. I'm sure it sounds like you guys use that same approach.
Yeah, and it's very visible if you lose access or your social media account gets hacked, right? You're gonna get noticed. It's social media. You're gonna get press articles about it. This isn't like an internal issue that you can have within your four walls of your company. It's on the internet. You're not going to want the brand reputation hit. So for a very simple implementation, you can avoid having that very unpleasant brand reputation hit.
So last question for you, Alex, is like if you had to, if you could go back in time, or if you, had to roll this out again, talk to me a little bit, or talk to the audience a little bit about what playbook you would follow, like sequence, stakeholders, milestones. Maybe just sum that up for us.
Yeah, I think we took a very simplistic approach. We sent out global communications to say, hey, we want everybody to adopt Cerby, and here's the self-service process. And then we got good adoption. So, if you have a good network already established on your digital marketing side, then it should be a very relatively easy process for rolling out. If you don't have and maybe some of the security people haven't worked much with digital marketing, find the IT team who is supporting them. There's some IT team managing websites and content management, most likely. Those are the people who can help you bridge the gap.
I love that. I love that. This is a super interesting conversation, and I think from my perspective, there's a lot to learn here. We still have a couple minutes. If there's questions from the audience, I know that I've been answering some of them in a form of stream of consciousness while we've been kind of going through those. But if there's questions, we'd love to take those now if you want to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up. But would love to answer any questions right now. Alex, thanks. This has been super helpful. I know I learned a lot just hearing directly from you, but this is it's been fun. Anything I should have asked you that I didn't? I guess I'll leave. Maybe that's the last question there.
No, I'd say take a look at it. At the very least, you can learn more especially if you're a security practitioner. This is probably not an area you've investigated.
I love that. Adrian, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
I was asking. I said, "Put me in, coach." I was trying to get Jerry's attention. It's I've been listening behind the scenes and commenting in the chat as well. So one question I had. It seems, Alex, like kind of like maybe it's easy to justify the ROI since there is kind of a painful problem that a lot of these teams have where they have to share these credentials and they're logging it out and back in. It is, in your experience, is that enough does that help to sell this to the team to not only is this going to make it more secure, but you're not going to have to constantly sign in, sign out if you have multiple accounts on one platform, for example. Just the streamlining of it, does that help sell the ROI on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you a very honest answer. I'm not a big ROI fan. I'm a big fan of doing what's right. And I think this is the right thing to do for your company. We're security practitioners. Our job is to protect all the company's assets, not just the ones that are corporate systems that we say that we manage. Like, these are part of our company. We should have them as part of our security program.
Right. But it couldn't hurt that you can also solve a workflow problem and make things less painful for people, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of icing on the cake.
Yeah.
I love that.
Also, maybe you mentioned it and I missed it, but I'm curious, because people come into products like this from different perspectives. Like, obviously, like I can think as long back as the Obama administration, like we saw the Associated Press lost control of their Twitter account, and people posted, there was an explosion at the White House, and then the whole stock market dips, right? So we've been seeing this for a while. Is this something you had been looking for? You've been at Colgate for a very long time. And then when you started to see companies providing this, you contacted Cerby, or is this one of these things where you're like, talking to your peers and like, man, I wish there was something that would solve X for me. And somebody said, oh, there is. And like, how did you find out about it? When did you really start looking for something to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, we were aware of the issue, and we were not aware of a solution. And I think the corporate IDPs of the worlds, like the Okta, Entra, Pings, right? This is not their wheelhouse, and they would agree there. So I work with a lot of venture capital firms, and one of those venture capital firms was Okta Ventures, and they're the ones who mentioned this solution. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds like a good solution. Let me take a look.
Awesome. I want to cede some of my time to Robert, who had a good question in the chat there. Matt, if you want to pull that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Robert's question is maybe talk a little bit about, has to do with, it says, can you talk us through how you circle back with social media account owners to make sure that unnecessary access has been removed? So that's the question. I think it's a question of like, how do you, if the marketing teams, your social teams are still managing access, even though it's through Cerby, what is that process like to make sure that only the right people still have access? How did you tie that back to your normal access management process?
Yeah, so I think the key difference here, and it's slightly different than your corporate systems, your IGA based ERPs or HCMs or something like that. This is social media. The people who are managing who has access to a channel or an account are the digital teams that own that channel or account. So we delegated that responsibility to them, and they manage who has access and who doesn't have access directly in Cerby. And the nice part about that is it's not that you're telling them use an AD group or use an email group or to come to IT and we'll set something up, or put in a ServiceNow ticket and we'll tell you in 2 weeks when it's done. Right? that there's nothing more frustrating for a business person than going through IT and waiting for us to fulfill a request. The best way to really get rid of any of that bump in the road is let the people who know who should have access govern it. And Cerby makes that really easy for both employees and third-party agencies. So, we didn't want to take that ownership. We wanted the ownership to stay in the people who own in the responsibility for that area. The nice part from a security perspective is we have full visibility to all that, so we can also be a governance layer or a secondary set of eyes there, but we don't need to be the first line of administration there.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that I saw a survey a month or two ago where they were saying the average, I think it was like 70-80% of companies can't get an employee the access they need in less than 7 days, right? So almost a business week and a half. So that kind of governance process and how long it takes to both grant and revoke, maybe that's part of it. Makes a lot more sense to decentralize some of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Matt and Alex, this was amazing. Love this discussion today. A very neat format too. Loved kicking it off with the video. Covered a lot of good ground. I didn't realize it was going to go beyond social media accounts, so that gave me a lot of ideas, different ways that you can use a product like this. So yeah, thank you so much for this. This is great.
This is fun. This is fun. Thank you, Alex, as well. Thanks, Adrian.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for the time. It was fun.
Yeah. And thanks to our sponsor, Cerby, for making today's webcast possible. And then just a final thanks to the audience for joining us. Reminder that there is a handout in there. It's a quick 2-pager on what Cerby does. Very concise, very clear. And thanks for all the great discussion and engagement and questions today. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone.